it says a lot about where we're at, that a year later, we still have no conflict resolution mechanism, that the clearinghouse in the GNU has no terms of reference, and that despite repeated attempts or promises that we were going to have Bosparats and get-togethers to bring cabinet together, to bring the leaders of the parties together, not one of those has taken place yet. And that makes it very, very difficult to raise matters within the government of national unity and within the party. Now, let me say very clearly that if one looks at Clause 17, it says there, and there's a recognition in there around the limitations on presidential prerogative, that appointments to cabinet are made in consultation with the leaders of the parties that have been given those particular slots. And it applies mutatis mutandis that if you're going to remove somebody, that a similar in-consultation process would take place. I wasn't even afforded the ability to inform Deputy Minister Whitfield myself about what was due to happen before he received a letter from the presidency. I wasn't even able to afford my FedEx the ability to be able to have the information shared with them before they had to learn about it in the media. And that is not respectful, and it is not right. And so I would urge that if this is going to continue, that these items, particularly Clause 19.3, need to be taken seriously by the ANC particularly, and that the statement of intent needs to be respected in both the letter and spirit, and not simply treated as an obstacle. And so we would like to see that codified. I believe the GNU needs the DA. I think that that was very clear from recent interactions with international bodies. And the DA has always gone out to bat for the GNU, whether it's in the Oval Office in Washington, whether it's with international investor conferences, whether it's dealing with our counterparts abroad. And we have always put the GNU's interests first because we believe it is the best vehicle to deliver meaningful change for the people of South Africa. We've had a number of setbacks along the way, but you mentioned Bella. It is a DA minister now, Saviwe Gagube, who's doing the regulations on Bella. You mentioned NHI. We were able to get through the medium-term development plan, the more pernicious aspects of the NHI, including the collapse into a single medical fund, removed from the medium-term development plan. And so I think that the DA has had a number of successes within the government of national unity, and that the contribution being made by ministers and deputy ministers who work jolly hard every day under very difficult circumstances shows that South Africa benefits from having the DA in the GNU. I think it has done a huge boost for investor confidence, and I certainly think that if one looks at the response and the sentiment from business, from industry, and from Labour, that the government has benefited from having the DA within it. Abram, sorry, I can't read my handwriting. What was your question again?
What was my question?
Yeah.
Have you had any...
Oh, no. And this is part of the problem, I might add. We're in the midst of a GNU crisis. It would have cost the president absolutely nothing to say, look, I'm dealing with the following people. Or have done an omnibus shuffle when he removed Deputy Minister Whitfield. But what it now appears is that the sole priority of the president over the course of the last while has been to take action against Deputy Minister Whitfield 5 months after the so-called transgression happened, and with no, in the interim, sign to me or to others that there was a major problem. If we can't pick up the phone and have these types of conversations with each other, or provide an opportunity for us to ventilate these issues, instead of being simply summoned to a meeting and told this is what's going to happen, and then asking for 24 hours to process it through my own party, and having that completely upended, how on earth are we going to have discussions about some of the bigger and pressing issues that face us? And this speaks to the heart about the respect that needs to be shown. It cannot be that the ANC behaves as if they got a majority in the last election. They do not govern with a majority. They govern as part of a coalition of which the DA is the second largest party. And without whose votes, it's probably unlikely that President Ramaphosa would be serving a second term. We put our trust and faith in his commitment to clean, accountable government and to a spirit of cooperation. That has been observed in the breach continuously over the course of the last year. And it simply cannot continue. The people of South Africa voted for change. They did not vote for more of the same. They did not vote for more of the Zuma years where the corrupt and those responsible for maladministration are shielded and protected. They did not vote for poor service delivery. They did not vote for ministers to treat Parliament with the contempt shown by Minister Nkabane and taking people in South Africa for fools that there were these committees set up to ensure that these cadres were deployed to the various seaters, where no doubt they would be prepared to carry on with their activities that they have been indulging in for the last 10 years. That is not change. That is more of the same. And South Africans voted for change, not more of the same. And as long as the DA is there, we're going to fight to ensure that the change happens. And that starts by putting pressure on the ANC and President Ramaphosa to clean up. It's no use sweeping outside the DA's doorstep if you're not prepared to sweep outside your own doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Colleagues, we are going to run out of time and we all want to be there for the rugby. Before I give the last round, I see there's a lot of hands. I'm going to give the people that has not asked questions yet first to bite at the cherry, but I would like to just ask Helen to also give a few comments. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to make a few comments about the statement of intent, because I, as you know, led the negotiating team of the Democratic Alliance in those negotiations. And the reason that we had to move so quickly was not because there was a parliamentary deadline for the convening of Parliament as some arbitrary date. It is because the Constitution of South Africa says that Parliament must be convened and a president must be elected 2 weeks after the election. So that was an unmovable deadline. And the bad faith of the ANC began in those negotiations. And in fact, they changed the entire draft the night before the parliamentary sitting. And we had to decide what were our non-negotiables. We did a lot of compromising, as you always have to when you're putting together a coalition. But the one thing that we were absolutely determined was unmovable was the mechanism of decision-making in the new Government of National Unity, which is largely a coalition government. And we had agreed that that method of decision-making would be by sufficient consensus. And the president, the night before, in his own office, tried to whittle down the definition of sufficient consensus, and we stood firm and were prepared not to vote for him if that clause was whittled down. Well, frankly, in the interim, the ANC has ignored every single clause of the statement of intent. We insisted that it was signed by Fikile and Mbalula before we agreed to vote for the president on the 14th of June last year. But frankly, that signature isn't worth the paper it's written on. Clause 18 says that all decisions in the Government of National Unity will be taken by consensus. And if you can't get consensus, it will be by sufficient consensus. And then under Clause 19, there is a clear definition of what sufficient consensus entails. There's supposed to be a mechanism to apply sufficient consensus. It has never been implemented. Instead, the ANC, in bad faith, tried to put together a clearinghouse mechanism which turned out to be nothing other than an attempt to get around the sufficient consensus clause. And it was a complete farce. All of the legislation to which I think Nkosinathi referred to was actually passed in the 6th Parliament before we got into the Government of National Unity. So that limited our leverage. But on other things, we have real leverage, and we have the most leverage in Parliament, which is the leverage the voters gave us. And we will use that leverage, as we have done on the VAT increase, and as we will do on the votes of corrupt ministers. And obviously on the complete and utter waste of money, as John has said, the 700 million rand, which is actually a cover for the ANC's 2026 election campaign. And we will have no part of it.
Thank you very much, Helen. The last 3 questions, I'm going to start here with you. Just get the mic.
Thank you, Vali. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News. If I can just rewind a bit to Andrew Whitfield's sacking. Is the DA saying that all transgressions are not equal if you feel that this move was too drastic? And correct me if I'm wrong, was there not perhaps a cabinet directive stating that members of the executive should not be travelling to the US when the tensions were at its height? And Andrew didn't seem to have trouble getting the president to approve other international trips that he went on. So was this not perhaps a sign that the president didn't want him to travel? And who took that decision to send him on that particular trip? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was Jason.
Thank you, Vali. Jason from News 24. Just one question. How do you foresee working in the GNU with the very people that you call delinquents and corrupt? And then I think the question on the replacement of Andrew Whitfield hasn't been answered yet. Do you foresee that position being replaced with another DA member, given that there were 6 deputy minister positions and 6 minister positions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. The last question there, right next to Jason.
Yes, Joseph Musia from JTP Media. My question to the DA is the issue of not going to the boycotting the national dialogue. I mean, in the grander scheme of things, it's not a constitutional mechanism or anything like that. It's just a I don't see it being a significant, having a significant impact on the way on what is happening in the country at the moment. My big question is when I came here, I was expecting that the DA, for me, that was the big news, that the DA was going to be withdrawing from. But if you are not continuing, and the ANC sees this as just another DA complaint that is not going to lead to anything, is this action significant enough? I mean, for me, like everybody else, it came as a surprise that the president decided to take this particular action against Mr. Whitfield. And you are still prepared to sit in the same cabinet with these people. If Mr. Whitfield had not been sacked, you wouldn't have been taking any of these, even with the complaints that you are talking about against all these other ministers that have been accused of corruption. The point is, why is it that the DA is not taking a stronger action in the interest of the whole country, not just of itself? Because it looks like you want to still stay in the government of national unity because it benefits the DA to be there.
Thank you very much. That was the last question. I'm going to hand over to John. We want to watch the rugby as well, Alex.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. And I think that where's Lindsay gone?
She's she's got a deadline. So
shall I answer her last then? So hopefully she can come back in. Jason, yes, we will be submitting a replacement name, and that will obviously be a matter for our federal executive to take through the process. It is a DA position. And once again, the fact that we got 6 ministers and 6 deputy ministers is also another example about how we put South Africa first. We proportionally are entitled to a lot more than that. And yet, it is another matter we had to swallow at that particular time in order to make sure that we got a GNU that worked so we could get South Africa moving forward. And so I fundamentally want to prove the point and repeat what I've said, that at every step of the way, we've taken action to ensure that the coalition of chaos and coalition of corruption, or the doomsday coalition, does not happen in South Africa. And that leaves me to Joseph's question. And I'm sorry, Joseph, I hope you haven't put your front page together already, that you're disappointed that we're not leaving the GNU. But one of the reasons we went into the GNU was to play a part in rescuing South Africa and to ensuring that we prevented a doomsday coalition. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, and as soon as night follows day, that a coalition differently constituted is going to either include the EFF or MK, or a combination of the both of them, or it is going to be a minority coalition with all of its instability and uncertainty that goes with it, or it could be a little coalition with a 2 or 3 seat slim margin, where you're going to have to make sure that every sitting, every single day, every single committee meeting, make sure that you've got all of your people there. And that ain't no way to run a government, I can tell you that. And we know one thing from the course of the last 20 years I've been in Parliament, that even on days of motions of no confidence and the like, that the governing party wasn't able to get all of its people into Parliament. And everything then on an order paper becomes a backwards and forwards, like we saw on the VAT issue. And that is also no way to run a stable government. And so the best option for South Africa remains the GNU in its current configuration, but things have to change. They cannot stay the same as they are. And the ANC needs to start realizing that we are part of a coalition. And being part of a coalition means that you show respect to your individuals. Now, I have shown nothing but respect to the President throughout the term of the GNU. And we will continue to do so. But it is time that that respect has started to be repaid. I can think of no more remarkably disrespectful thing to do to a fellow leader than to undermine them in their own party. And the actions taken around the firing of Andrew Whitfield could only have been served to undermine me in my own party. Now, if I had done that to the President, I imagine I would have received a furious reaction. If I'd undercut him in the eyes of his own party, it would have received a serious action. We need to understand that we are all leaders. Yes, the ANC may be the largest party in the coalition, but it doesn't have 51%. The DA has 22% in the coalition. We also are not the largest party, but we deserve to be treated, and our leaders deserve to be treated with the same respect that is expected of us to show the President of the Republic of South Africa. And that there must be an understanding that it is through collaboration, cooperation, and mutual respect that we will make these things work. And I am frankly tired of being disrespected and shown the remarkable disrespect that the DA is and other coalition partners are shown on a far too regular basis. And so people must treat the DA the way they would like to be treated and the like. And I've shown as well very clearly that we are coalition partners that can be relied on. When we say we're going to do something, we do it. Joseph, I would also say that South Africa is better off because the DA is there. And I can guarantee you that your pension, your investments are much better off in an environment where there is confidence in the South African economy. Having traveled to the US, and I don't need to show you what Mr. Trump showed the world on his screen there, if that is what's going to form part of the government of the Republic of South Africa, I can assure you that international partners are going to turn their back on South Africa in a big way. I love this country. My 3 daughters and my family are South Africans. We hold no passport for any other country, and that is why I've dedicated the better part of my life to serving South Africa and to make sure that I can build a better place for my children and the children of all South Africans in a country that provides opportunity for more people, provides a better future to our yesterday. And that is what has got me out of bed in politics in very difficult times, including on a Saturday morning and including just before the rugby, to get up and try and make a difference. That is what I and hundreds of other public representatives do every single day, because we want our country to succeed. I'm not going to sit back and watch the country that I love be completely destroyed by demagogues and those who seek to divide us, those who thrive on hatred, those who regard killing people as a solution to problems rather than dialogue and talking together. And that is what drives the DA, and that is why we're not going to walk out on the GNU, and we're not going to walk out on South Africa, and we're not going to walk out on the people who are looking to us to show the leadership that's required in this country to get it moving forward. However, we need to then genuinely focus on the things that are going to get our country moving forward. And that cannot be the ways of the past: corruption, maladministration, pilfering of public money, disrespect shown to Parliament, and all of these other things that have become simply par for the course over the last 20 years in South Africa. We need to change, and the GNU needs to lead that particular change. And so we will stay in the GNU as long as we believe we can be part of that change. However, we should not be tested to the point where we will have to make a decision. And that is why I've said we voted for the GNU and we voted for Mr. Ramaphosa because his public pronouncements were that he was committed to cleaning up government, to fighting against the corrupt, to implementing the findings of the state capture inquiry, to ensuring that those who are responsible for state capture are brought to justice and held accountable. And it is that distinguished him from the others in his party who belong to other factions. But the more he protects, the more he obfuscates, and the more that those who are guilty of new and fresh transgressions, as well as held unaccountable for past acts of omission and commission, remain unpunished or untouched, he becomes increasingly less distinguishable from that other faction. And that may well tip the scales in the future. But for now, we will continue to put the interests of South Africans first. However, we will be taking these steps in Parliament, and they are significant steps against these particular budgets. And we must not dismiss how important the government and the ANC regard this national dialogue. But again, I say to civil society, you need to play your role now in helping to help apply the pressure, and that this dialogue should not proceed until such time as those who are guilty of corruption and maladministration and those who have not lived up to the standards of the ministerial handbook and other are held accountable in the same way that Andrew Whitfield has been done. Lindsay, I've saved your question because you were outside the room. I believe there are different scales of transgressions, and I believe that there are ways of dealing with different types of transgressions. Taking a South African Air Force plane and taking a bunch of ANC colleagues on a jolly when you're the Minister of Defence is an abuse of power in probably the most egregious way. Yet that warranted a 3-month salary dock and a public admonishment by the President. Andrew Whitfield, 10 days before the intended trip, wrote to the President. He requested an ability to travel, not for official travel. He travelled for a party function, as many ANC people travel for party functions regularly around the world, in order to meet with some of the people that we had been building a relationship with in the United States, in order to ensure that we do not end up being kicked out of AGOA and ensure that South Africa's agenda remained firmly on the plate. There was no meetings at the White House or any of those, and there was no way Andrew Whitfield was going in an official capacity. He was there as a member of the DA. It was a party-funded trip. It was not paid for by government. And despite following up repeatedly for those days, he never got a response. To this day, he's never received a response. That is not only rude, it is unprofessional. And I noticed that Alvin Boertes this week thought he would be clever by publishing the fact that he wrote and the very next day got permission. Well, How is it that ANC deputy ministers write to the president for permission, they get an answer within 24 hours, but a deputy minister, has still not received an answer to that? Had the president written back and said no, I could quite clearly understand. I also recommended to the president in my interaction with them that perhaps there are other mechanisms that we could use, either a public admonishment, perhaps a docking of pay. I even said we would look at shuffling portfolios, which was the same remedy that was used for Minister Similani when her allegations around the VBS Bank originally broached. She was moved from justice to housing. I suggested perhaps we could, if there was a problem with him in that particular position, we could move him then. But there was an insistence that he now had to be fired. And I don't think it's fair that you try and earn tough guy credentials by going after a DA member when you're not prepared to be the tough guy and going after your own members who are breaking the Executive Ethics Code, the Executive Ethics Act, and who through acts of omission and commission cost the South African public a great deal in terms of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Before I'm going to ask my colleague Karabo to close this meeting, I would just like to give a few words to our federal chairperson, Dr. Ivan Meyer, as well. Dr. Meyer.
Thank you, Willie, and good afternoon, everybody. I see that many came here with the expectation that we will leave the GNU. That's the preface of many of your questions. Well, there's a reason why you came here with that expectation, because for the last 30 years, you had a governing party that put their party first. Today, it is different because we are putting South Africa first and not the party first. Today, we are also honoring the electoral mandate of the 29th of May of last year, because we are ending one-party dominance. And last year, in the election, we are honoring a mandate. During our manifesto, we said, rescue South Africa. And all of you know that in the GNU, the Democratic Alliance and all the parties committed themselves to 3 key priorities. Number 1, to build an inclusive economy. Now, all of you will know that corruption will destroy and is destroying an inclusive economic growth. The second priority of the GNU is to reduce poverty. And I think all of you will agree that corruption will increase poverty and not decrease poverty. And thirdly, the GNU is committed to building a capable state. Corruption is destroying the pillars of a capable state. And therefore, we cannot sit here and simply see a continuation of corruption, because corruption violates the 3 priorities of the government of national unity. And as you have heard, we will withdraw from the national dialogue because it is nothing but an electoral campaign. 700 million will be abused by the ANC in the election, as Jan Zille has indicated, and therefore we cannot continue taking part in the national dialogue, because that is also corruption, and we will not take part in any corruption. And Andrew Whitfield was removed because he was exposing corruption, and that is the reality, and that is our position here today. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Thank you, John. Thank you, Ms. Zille, and thank you, Willie. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our presser today. I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for availing yourselves here. And for those of you who are watching online, thank you. We'll chat again.